She tried to discredit him on live television. His response? It changed everything. The email came late in the afternoon, a short, formal message from the producers of The Morning Exchange, one of the most watched talk shows in the country. They wanted Malcolm Raines, tech entrepreneur and CEO of Innovis, to be a guest on their upcoming segment about diversity in business. Malcolm had seen this play before, a mainstream platform suddenly remembering black entrepreneurs exist, trotting them out for a few minutes of applause before moving on to the next trending topic. But this was different. Innovis wasn't some upstart. They had just secured a multi-million-dollar defense contract, outbidding some of the biggest names in the industry. That wasn't luck. That was 2 decades of relentless work. Still, he hesitated before accepting. Something felt off. His assistant, Imani, picked up on his hesitation. "You sure you want to do this? You know how these shows are. They love a success story, but they love tearing one down even more." Malcolm leaned back in his chair. "I'll handle it. Besides, it's national exposure. Let's see what they have to say." Imani exhaled, shaking her head. "Just don't let them bait you." He nodded, though deep down, he knew the game. If this interview was a setup, they were playing chess with the wrong man. The morning of the interview, Malcolm arrived at KXNT Studios in Los Angeles. The air in the green room was cool, sterile. A young producer greeted him, barely looking up from her clipboard. "Mr. Raines, thanks for being here. We'll mic you up in 5. No small talk, no warm-up, just in and out like a transaction. As he sat in the makeup chair, an assistant powdered his face with practiced indifference. The monitor on the wall showed the live broadcast of the show, a panel segment on celebrity scandals, followed by a cooking demo, then a transition card, coming up next. The black tech boom. Is it talent or special treatment? Malcolm clenched his jaw. So this was the angle. But if they thought they had the upper hand, they were in for a surprise. Still, he wouldn't realize just how far they were willing to go. The set of The Morning Exchange was designed to look inviting. Soft blues and golds, a glass coffee table between the host's chair and the guests. Cameras hovered, like silent observers, capturing every movement, every expression. Malcolm adjusted his suit jacket as he took his seat across from Vivian Sloan, the show's lead anchor, a seasoned journalist with a reputation for asking tough questions. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Malcolm Raines," she began, her voice smooth, practiced. "CEO of Innovis, a true American success story." Malcolm gave a polite nod. "Appreciate you having me." She leaned in slightly, flipping through her cue cards. "Now, let's get right into it. Your company recently landed a $200 million government contract, beating out some of the biggest names in tech. That's impressive." Malcolm knew this game. Build him up first. Make it seem like they respected his achievements. He gave a measured response. "It was a long process, but yeah, we put in the work. We developed a security encryption system that outperformed our competitors. Simple as that." Vivian crossed her legs. "Some have called it groundbreaking." A subtle pause. "But others have raised questions." Malcolm didn't flinch. "Questions?" She picked up a card and read aloud. "Some industry experts say Innovis benefited from certain federal diversity incentives, that companies like yours have an edge in these contracts because agencies are looking to diversify their vendors. That perhaps this wasn't just about being the best, but about meeting a quota." There it was, the real reason he was here. Malcolm didn't move. He kept his eyes on Vivian, his tone calm but steely. "Let me get this straight. You're suggesting that a company which outperformed legacy defense contractors only got the contract because I'm black?" Vivian smiled tightly. "I'm not suggesting anything, Mr. Raines. I'm quoting public commentary." He leaned forward just slightly, his voice steady. "Commentary that somehow never comes up when white-owned firms win bids. Funny how excellence becomes suspicious when it comes from someone like me." A beat of silence. "I just want to give our audience a complete picture," Vivian said. "You mean a convenient narrative?" Malcolm replied. "Because the reality is, my company didn't just meet the standards, we exceeded them. The Department of Defense has the most rigorous evaluation metrics in government procurement. Innovis scored higher in performance, security, scalability, and cost efficiency. Those are facts, not favors. He paused, letting the words hang. But if it helps your segment to imply I got here through charity instead of capability, go ahead. Just be honest about what story you're really telling. The control room, according to later reports, had gone silent. Producers hovered by monitors. Someone whispered, "Is this live?" Another replied, "Absolutely." Vivian cleared her throat. Well, some would argue that federal incentives are in fact necessary to balance historic inequities in contracting. Malcolm nodded. I agree. Leveling the playing field is essential. But don't mistake access for advantage. We still have to outperform. You think the government hands out 9-figure contracts without a stack of compliance reviews, cybersecurity stress tests, and performance demos? He looked directly into the camera. Being black doesn't make me less qualified. It makes me more scrutinized. And despite that, we delivered. Vivian shifted in her seat. Okay, let's pivot a bit. Some critics have also pointed to your company's meteoric rise as unusual. You started out with a 2-person team in a garage, and now you're competing with Fortune 500s. How did you scale so quickly? Malcolm smiled. By solving problems no one else was solving. While other firms were focused on ad algorithms and data mining, we built tools to secure municipal infrastructure, power grids, water systems, emergency communications. You'd be surprised how many cities still run on software older than the smartphones in your pockets. He leaned back. We didn't chase attention. We chased utility. Turns out, when your product works, people find you. Vivian glanced at her notes, clearly recalibrating. The angle she came in with wasn't working. Malcolm wasn't defensive. He was prepared. Let's talk about your background, she said. You were raised in East Oakland. Single, parent household. Public schools. What made you believe you could one day sit at the same table as the tech elite? He met her gaze. Because I've been building tables since I was 13. Vivian blinked, caught off guard by the sharpness of his reply. What do you mean by that? I mean, Malcolm said, when you grow up watching your mom stretch every dollar and fix broken appliances with duct tape and YouTube tutorials, you start to learn 2 things, how to solve problems and how to spot when someone's underestimating you. He paused, his tone still even but firm. I didn't wait for permission to dream. I just started building what I needed to survive. Eventually, that turned into building what others needed too. Vivian nodded slowly, clearly trying to recover her footing. Well, there's no denying you've achieved something remarkable. But with success comes scrutiny. Some have pointed out that your company's board lacks diversity. All male and primarily white. How do you respond to that? Malcolm gave a small, measured laugh. So now, I'm not black enough? Vivian opened her mouth, but he continued. I've spent my life being told I wasn't qualified enough, didn't belong, wasn't capable. And now that I'm here, I'm being told I'm not inclusive enough in how I lead. He leaned slightly forward. Here's what I'll say. I hire based on capability, character, and commitment. Not checkboxes, not quotas. And if anyone looks at our executive team and stops at the surface, they miss the story entirely. He gestured subtly. Our CTO is a first-generation immigrant from Bangladesh who built encryption models in his teens. Our CFO is a woman who grew up in foster care and put herself through college bartending. My head of operations is a paraplegic veteran who rebuilt his life after a roadside bomb took both legs. He looked back at Vivian. So, if you want to talk diversity, let's talk about the kind that actually matters. The kind that changes outcomes. There was a long pause in the studio. Vivian shifted in her chair again. Well, thank you for that clarification. You're welcome, Malcolm said, calm as ever. Let's talk vision, she continued. Where do you see Innovis in 5 years? Malcolm took a breath. We're building toward a world where cybersecurity isn't just for governments and billion-dollar firms. Every school, every clinic, every small business deserves protection. We want to decentralize access to high-grade digital infrastructure. And what's your biggest challenge right now? Bias, he said without hesitation. The kind that doesn't show up in memos but in meetings. The kind that gets you second-guessed even after you've delivered. The kind that asks if your win was earned or gifted. He adjusted his cough and continued. But every time we show up and do the work, we chip away at that bias. And eventually, the story changes. Vivian looked at him for a long moment before speaking again. Final question. What do you want young people, especially young people of color, watching this to take away from your journey? Malcolm didn't pause. That your circumstance isn't your ceiling. He turned to the camera. You might not have connections. You might not have capital. But if you've got vision, discipline, and the courage to keep showing up, you can build something that matters. The segment wrapped with polite applause from the studio audience. The credits rolled, the lights dimmed slightly, and production assistants swarmed the set. Malcolm stood up, removing his mic as Vivian extended her hand. Thank you for coming on, she said, her smile now more genuine, tinged with something that might have been respect. Of course, he replied, shaking her hand. Behind the scenes, the atmosphere buzzed. Producers exchanged glances, a few clapped. One of the junior assistants mouthed wow as he passed. Imani met him in the hallway, tablet in hand, already scrolling through mentions. You're trending, she said. He raised an eyebrow. Good trending or bad trending? She smirked. Mixed. Which is basically a win these days. They reached the exit, and a small group of young interns stood there, watching him. One stepped forward. Mr. Rains, she said nervously. That was incredible. I've never heard anyone speak like that on this show before. He smiled warmly. Appreciate that. What's your name? Zoe. Well, Zoe, remember this. Never shrink to fit the room. She nodded, wide-eyed, as he turned and exited the studio into the late morning sun. By noon, the clip of his interview had gone viral. Social media lit up with hashtags, number Malcolm Rains, number earned not given, number the Rains effect. Some praised his composure. Others debated his comments. A few tried to spin the old narratives, but they didn't land the same way anymore. The internet had seen something different that morning. Confidence without arrogance, truth without bitterness. A blogger posted, "That wasn't an interview, that was a masterclass." CNN picked it up, then Forbes. Then late-night talk shows began cutting clips into their monologues. And somewhere, in a small public school in Detroit, a 12-year-old black boy sat watching it on YouTube during lunch. He didn't say a word, just stared. Then he opened his notebook and started drawing again. Not pictures this time, but ideas. Business names, app sketches, a goal list. Back at Innovis HQ, Malcolm stood in front of a whiteboard with his team, mapping out their next product launch. The energy in the room was electric. Don't let the noise distract you, he said. Stay focused on the mission. One of his engineers raised a hand. You think this will help or hurt us long term? Malcolm considered for a moment. That depends on what we build next. Let's make sure it's undeniable. In the days that followed, the ripple effects of the interview began to crystallize. Innovis saw a surge in web traffic, new client inquiries, and investment interest. But more than that, the cultural conversation shifted. Suddenly, Malcolm Rains wasn't just a tech CEO, he was a symbol, whether he wanted to be or not. An op-ed in The Atlantic called him a new archetype of American leadership. A columnist at the Wall Street Journal argued that meritocracy just met its best defender. Invitations poured in, from universities, conferences, even a request to testify before Congress about digital equity. Imani walked into his office one afternoon, laptop in hand. You've been asked to speak at MIT, Stanford, and the Aspen Ideas Festival, and the White House wants a briefing. Malcolm blinked. The White House? Yep, not a public thing, just a conversation. He looked out the window for a long moment before answering. Tell them I'll come, but I'm bringing my team. When the news broke that Innovis had been invited to consult on national cybersecurity initiatives, the media frenzy reignited. The narrative had shifted from suspicion to celebration. But Malcolm knew that could change in an instant. We don't chase applause, he reminded his staff. We chase results. Still, he couldn't deny the power of what had happened. People who had never heard of Innovis were now quoting his interview. Teachers played it in classrooms. Parents showed it to their kids. A high school debate team used his answer as their opening argument. Meanwhile, some of the old guard in tech remained skeptical. At a closed-door industry roundtable in New York, a well-known CEO leaned over to another executive and whispered, "Let's song the shine lasts." Someone nearby overheard it and posted it online. Malcolm didn't respond publicly, but during a keynote address at a data science summit a week later, he closed with this: "Some people wait for you to fail just so they can say they were right, but what they don't realize is you were never doing it for them anyway." The crowd stood. Applause thundered. Backstage, Imani handed him a bottle of water. "You really said that line off the cuff?" He smiled. "Mostly. Been thinking it for years, though." She nodded, then hesitated. "Do you ever get tired of carrying it all? The pressure, the attention?" He sat for a moment, rolling the bottle in his hand. "Sometimes," he said. "But then I remember who's watching, and I remember the kid I used to be. That keeps me going." Not long after, Innovis was approached by a major public university to co-develop a cybersecurity certification program. The initiative would train underserved students in digital infrastructure protection with guaranteed internships and job placement. It was ambitious, unprecedented, and exactly the kind of impact Malcolm had dreamed of. In the boardroom, the project team debated logistics, budgets, and timelines. One executive asked, "Do we really have the capacity to do this right now? We're already stretched." Malcolm replied without hesitation, "Then we grow the capacity. This isn't charity, it's strategy. If we train the next generation, we don't just fix the pipeline, we become it." Later that week, he visited the same high school he'd once attended in East Oakland. The auditorium hadn't changed much. Faded banners, stiff plastic seats, echoes bouncing off walls. But the energy was different. When he walked on stage, the students erupted. Phones were out, cheers rose. A few kids held handmade signs, "Build the table," and "Circumstance is not equal to ceiling." Malcolm waited for the noise to settle, then leaned into the mic. "I wasn't supposed to be here," he began. Laughter. "I mean that literally. Statistically, I should have been a dropout. A statistic. But I had people who believed in me. I had mentors, books, chances. And when none of that was enough, I had stubbornness." He walked the stage slowly. "I know what it feels like to be underestimated. I know what it's like to sit in the back of the class and pretend you're not smart because smart gets you mocked. But let me tell you something. There is nothing more dangerous to the status quo than a young person who decides they're worth the investment." The room went still. A teacher wiped her eyes in the back row. "And if no one tells you this today, let me the one to say it. You are." Afterward, a line of students waited to talk to him. Some asked for advice. Some just wanted to shake his hand. One girl, no older than 13, clutched a worn notebook and whispered, "I want to build things too." Malcolm knelt down slightly to meet her gaze. "Then start. Don't wait until someone tells you you're allowed. Just start." Back at his car, he sat for a moment before driving away, staring at the cracked pavement of the school lot. The same one he used to walk across, wondering if he'd ever matter. Now, he knew the answer. The months that followed were a whirlwind. Innovis expanded into 3 new markets, hired aggressively, and launched their most secure platform yet. Malcolm found himself bouncing between cities, briefings, interviews, advisory roles. His face graced the cover of Fast Company, and his keynote at SXSW was streamed to over 1 million viewers. Yet for all the lights and praise, he never lost sight of the quiet moments. Early mornings in the office before the team arrived. Emails to mentees. Walks through neighborhoods that still bore the scars of neglect. He made a point of staying grounded, of remembering that visibility wasn't the same as invincibility. One night, after another long flight and too many unread messages, he sat alone in a hotel room overlooking the DC skyline. The television was on low. Some news panel discussing economic trends. His name came up. A commentator said, "He's impressive, sure. But let's not forget, public image is a game. He's winning it now, but we've seen these stories before." He muted the screen. In the silence, he thought back to that first interview with Vivian Sloan, how it had shifted everything, and how fragile that shift was. Perception was currency, but it could also be a cage. His phone buzzed. A text from Imani. "New request." 60 Minutes wants a sit-down. Big piece. Let me know. He replied, only if they agree to visit the school. A pause. Then, you're serious? Dead serious. I don't want to talk about success in a studio. I want to talk about possibility where it starts. The next morning, he woke early and laced up his sneakers. No meetings yet, no cameras, just a jog through the city. He ran past monuments, offices, construction sites, places built by people whose names would never be known, but whose work shaped everything. As the sun rose higher, he stopped at a bench, breathing heavily, heart pounding. He pulled out his phone and opened the Notes app. At the top, he typed, "Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you build into others." He hit save and kept running. The 60 Minutes crew arrived 2 weeks later, not in a high-rise studio, but at Roosevelt Public High in East Oakland. Malcolm stood near the entrance, arms crossed, watching as the production team unpacked cameras and lights. Students peeked curiously from classroom windows. Inside the cafeteria, makeshift lights illuminated a corner stage where folding chairs were arranged for the interview. No suits, no filters. Just worn tile floors, old murals, and kids sitting quietly to see what this was about. The host, veteran journalist Leah Martinez, adjusted her mic and glanced at Malcolm. Ready? Always. They began with the usual questions. Early life, building Innovis, the viral interview. But the tone was different here. It felt less like a spotlight, more like a mirror. "You've become a symbol," Leah said. "What's the weight of that?" Malcolm paused. "I didn't ask to be a symbol. I just didn't hide." "And do you ever worry the public version of you is louder than the real one?" He smiled. "Only when I forget that the real one doesn't need volume. He just needs consistency." Behind the camera, a few teachers watched, arms folded, nodding slowly. Leah leaned in. "What's next?" He turned slightly, gesturing to the students seated nearby. "They are." One girl raised her hand from the audience. "How do you know when you've made it?" Malcolm looked at her carefully. "When your presence makes someone else believe, they can too." A silence followed, not empty, but full. Later, outside, as the sun began to set over the schoolyard, Leah packed up her notes. "This wasn't the story I expected," she said. Malcolm chuckled. "It usually isn't." She extended her hand. "Thank you for the honesty." He shook it. "Thanks for coming to where the real stories start." As the crew pulled away and the school emptied out, Malcolm stayed behind for a moment. He walked past the chain-link fence, past the old gym, past the bench where he used to sit during lunch and draw circuits in his notebook. He sat down one last time, looking out at the cracked asphalt and the distant noise of life moving forward. And in that quiet, it was clear. He hadn't just changed the narrative. He had rewritten the rules.